So as I mentioned, there's both living and non-living aspects of a biogeochemical cycle. And this means that as chemicals move through biogeochemical cycles, they get transformed by a lot of different processes, and they get transformed into the bio part of the cycle, the living part of the cycle, and then they may get transformed into something that's a part of the geochemical or non-living. And so we call those processes that help transform into or within the biological cycle, the living cycle, biotic processes, and those which help transform out of the biotic cycle, or within the abiotic or non-living cycle, the abiotic processes. And so the two most common biotic processes probably are photosynthesis and respiration, followed very shortly by consumption. Remember, quick, brief photosynthesis is the conversion of carbon dioxide and water in with the use of sunlight energy into sugars for a plant to use for their own energy, or to be consumed by animals and other organisms to be used for their energy. And then respiration is the process of taking those sugars and converting them into energetic ATP molecules that we can use, or also in some cases actually converting some of the bits and pieces into other molecules that can be used in the body. And in general, we also take in a lot of other, through consumption, we take in a lot of other chemicals. And anytime you take any bit of one chemical and turn it into your own body tissue, like you build your own muscle tissue with it, or bone tissue with it, or whatever it is, that process is what's known as assimilation. That's the one word on there I'd expect that you might not know that well. But when you consume substances and then make the molecules that made up the original substance a part of your body later, you are assimilating those substances into your body. Abiotic factors are a lot of things that you learned about in earth science. So things like parts of the rock cycle, sedimentation, where sediments that aren't rock get kind of deposited and turned into rock, the opposite of that, which is weathering and erosion, and very importantly, combustion. And combustion is burning things, basically. And anytime we burn stuff, living stuff or non-living stuff, we convert the chemicals in it into very, very different chemicals than we originally had. So those are some major examples of abiotic processes, but not by any stretch all of the abiotic processes. So if it helps to remember, you might remember that biotic means living and abiotic means non-living. And so if you're trying to think of biotic versus abiotic processes, the stuff that living organisms are engaged in basically is a biotic process, and anything that a living organism is not really engaged in is going to be an abiotic process, with one exception, which is kind of combustion. You can burn a living organism into bits and pieces, and that's an abiotic process, even though you are taking tissue from a living organism and burning it. And most organisms rely pretty heavily on biogeochemical cycles to, as I kind of alluded to with my talk about assimilation, to build major macromolecules. And if you have forgotten the major macromolecules, we learned about them at the beginning of the year. There are 4 major macromolecules. This might be cluing you in a little bit to what they are, but they are carbohydrates, lipids, also known as your fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. And we're going to look a little bit more about how the major biogeochemical cycles, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, water cycle, and carbon cycle, how those major biogeochemical cycles help to cycle the different types of chemicals in the ecosystems, and how they go from one type of macromolecule to another type of macromolecule.